Let's speculate for a moment. What would happen if our sun suddenly went out for an hour, or for a month, or let's say even for a whole year? What would happen to mankind? The very last photons from the surface of our star and the last particles that make up the solar...
By the way, I want to say, if the only message that you have written in my chat is the exact same only message that all the other bots have written in my chat, you may get accidentally banned. So maybe don't pretend to be a bot if you don't want to get banned.
Wind have started their final flight towards the Earth. No one yet suspects that the heart of our solar system has stopped functioning. 8 to 9 minutes later, and the sky suddenly turns black. Darkness descends upon the entire planet.
Dun,
no
dun,
matter whether
dun.
at the moment it's the deep dark of midnight or a bright, sunny noontime at your location, you can quickly and easily see the difference. The stars are now all clearly visible against the sheer black backdrop of the sky. The moon is not visible at all, since there is no longer any sunlight for it to reflect. A moment
Weird.
before the onset of the all-enshrouding darkness, bright northern lights may appear due to changes in the magnetic field around the Earth and disturbances in the ionosphere. The most dreadful consequence of
Ionosphere.
all is the complete and utter cessation of the process of photosynthesis, resulting in plants
We would
and
die. Okay, bye.
cyanobacteria no longer producing oxygen. This will soon lead to, how shall we say, difficulties for every living being. After an hour, true panic reigns over the heretofore
Difficulties.
daytime side of the Earth. Power and communication outages propagate across the entire planet. Temperatures everywhere drop by several degrees, and the Earth's surface begins to slowly cool. But from the inside, the planet is still heated by its molten
Yay.
core. 24 hours in, dawn has not and will not arrive. Panic and chaos are enveloping the entire world. State authorities have almost zero control over the situation. Humankind is trying to figure out what the hell happened while coping with massive power and water supply outages. The temperature on the surface falls to between 5 to 7 degrees Celsius. That's about 41 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and has now decreased by about 15 to 20 degrees
All right,
Celsius.
Pizzle.
That's a drop of about 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Some
That's
species
crazy.
of plants and microorganisms begin to die.
Thea, 16 months,
The
Emra.
inhabitants of the oceans, for the time being, feel almost no changes. After 7 days, it's still dark. The average temperature on Earth is now minus 17 degrees Celsius. That's about 1 degree Fahrenheit. In areas where
That's
there are
so
tectonic
terrible.
faults, it's still warm, thanks to geothermal energy not letting the surface freeze over. Most plants have already died due to cold or lack of light. Herbivorous and heat-loving animals also begin to die. In the oceans, phytoplankton begin to die as well. The inhabitants of shallow waters suffer tremendously from the cold, and the surface of the ocean is beginning to turn to ice. By now, scientists and other individuals have realized what has happened and
Oh,
rushed
no.
to organize and equip shelters.
Someone deadass said
1
Mimi
month
could
in,
stay
and
warm.
the Earth is continuing to cool. The average temperature on the surface is now about minus 30 degrees Celsius. That's minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit. And almost the entire planet is now coated with ice. Virtually
Ninja,
all
thanks for
plants
28
and
months.
cyanobacteria have perished. Some species of trees, especially conifers, are still alive. But with the lack of sunlight, even they are
Ninja
not producing
Poggers.
oxygen. In fact, most of the Earth's living things have died. But some
Alex Clark,
bacteria
thanks for the
still
4 months.
carry on with their normal life activity. Most of the remaining life on Earth is now found only near geothermal springs and underwater. Interestingly, the layer of ice on the surface of the oceans slows down their cooling. And in the areas of oceanic tectonic faults and geothermal sources, the water is still warm, obviously being naturally heated. But even in the ocean, the drama of a
The
mass
sperm
extinction
whales.
event begins to unfold. 1 year
Gabby,
in,
thanks for
and the
subbing.
surface of the Earth and the oceans are covered with a thick layer of ice. According to Professor David Stevenson
Damn.
at Caltech, the temperature on the surface of the Earth should drop to about minus 40 degrees Celsius, and that's the same in Fahrenheit. Life endures now only deep in the Earth's oceans. And perhaps
Aw,
some
Sugo,
groups of
I thanks for
humans
gifting
might
us
be able
up
to
to
survive on the
definitely
surface of
you.
the planet
Unstoppable
in
BMW 3 to
places
2
like
months.
Iceland and other areas with large amounts of geothermal activity. Professor Stevenson believes that the Earth will continue to cool for another several thousand years until the surface temperature reaches approximately minus 160 degrees Celsius. That's about minus 256 degrees Fahrenheit. At that point, life on the planet, in the usual sense of the word, will simply become impossible. And let's not forget about the gravity of the sun. After all, it's unlikely that the sun could suddenly go out without losing its gravitational pull. If the sun ceases to hold the planets and
Jay
other
Boy for
celestial
Blue, thank you
bodies
for
in their
subbing.
orbits, then the planets and asteroids will simply fly away into outer space, some of them possibly even colliding with one another. The Earth, for one, will soar.
That's
out
like
into
scary, but kind of
space,
pog
where
too.
it could get bombarded with
Zay,
asteroids,
thank you for the
comets,
22
and
months after
radiation,
the 2 months.
collide
Welcome
with
back.
another planet, or even someday end up in the gravity well of a black hole. There's also a very small possibility that after wandering through space for a very long time, the Earth would
That
be
was a
able
close
to
one.
integrate into another stellar system and find a new sun. In the end, however, it's important to realize that this scenario is just a fantasy, or rather a thought experiment of sorts. As for the real future of our
Not
star,
really a fantasy,
in
more like a
couple of
nightmare.
billion years, the sun will swell and turn into a red giant. Our star will swallow Mercury and Venus, and Earth and Mars will become heated up to several thousand degrees. In 5 billion years, the sun will explode and throw off its outer envelope, leaving at the
I
center
don't know why
of the
this is
solar
so
system
funny to
a
me.
gradually cooling stellar core, a white dwarf around which will orbit whatever remains of the solar system after the explosion. Concerning humankind,
5 billion
its fate
years, it's
remains
gonna
unknown. Hopefully,
explode.
by that time, we'll be able to fly to other planets and star systems. But that is a story for another day.
You mean better ending than Game of Thrones?